Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Hello, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Wednesday, September 28th. I'm Will Tarter, Fellow at the Center for Community Solutions, and moderator for today's panel conversation, the John W. Barkley Memorial Forum. This is a timely conversation, as it has been over a decade of Cuyahoga County government reform since voters approved Issue 6 in November 2009 with 66% of the vote. This implemented a new county executive structure, an 11-member county council, replacing the 3-commissioner system. At the same time, voters rejected Issue 5, which would have created a 15-member panel to study and implement government reform. Fast forward 12 years, and in less than 6 weeks, on November 8th, voters will also decide on a new county executive, just the third person to hold the seat. Cuyahoga County's government serves 1.2 million residents with a roughly $1.5 billion budget. The government reform was met with promises of streamlined services, transparent, effective, and accountable leadership, equity, and accountability. But still, the charter has seen its fair share of tinkering at the ballot box over the years, and both challenges and opportunities in governance have revealed themselves through the years. So how did we get here? Has the reform upheld its original promise? What lessons have we learned? And what are the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead moving forward? Joining us on stage to discuss this issue is Marcia Goldberg, who's been a member of the League of Women Voters for nearly 40 years. Marcia has served, that's great. Marcia has served as president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland and is a member of the League's Observer Corps assigned to Cuyahoga County Council. The League was an early supporter of the charter form of county government and sends a representative to every council meeting. Dale Miller is a member of Cuyahoga County Council representing District 2. He is the chair of the Finance and Budgeting Committee. He has been on council since its inception, and through his work on county council, has been working to create the effective, efficient, and transparent county government envisioned in the county charter. And joining us virtually is Marty Zanotti, former mayor of Parma Heights. Marty was president of the Cuyahoga County Mayors and City Managers Association from 2007 to 2009. He's been called one of the architects of the county charter and helped lead the transition to the new form of government. If you have questions for our panelists, you can text them to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. You can also tweet your questions at the City Club, and City Club staff will try and work it into the second half of the program. Members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming our panelists today. So before we begin, I want to note that it was October 2009 when there was a debate between Issue 5 and Issue 6. That panel was moderated by a young and respected reporter with 90.3 IdeaStream, Mr. Dan Moulthrop. So it all comes full circle. On that panel was Marty Zanotti. So Mayor Zanotti, we'll start with you. Take us back to 2009, when voters approved the new county charter. What were your expectations of the new county government with the new county executive structure compared to the former one with the 3 county commissioners?
Well, first of all, Will, thank you very much for allowing me to join virtually today and for allowing me to participate in this forum. Before I start, I would like to ask you all to keep our friends and family in Florida in your prayers. It's very bad down there right now and going to get much worse. So Even though you've had some bad weather in Cleveland lately, you can't imagine what it's like for them down there. So, well, county government, I think to answer that question most properly would be to go back to why we did it to begin with. And that is the antiquated form of government created by the state for county governments lacked one basic premise, and that was it had no system of checks and balances. Any good government starts with a strong executive and then has a council that an elected body that provides that system of checks and balances. It's the very core of every governmental structure that we have, including that in Washington. We didn't have that in Cuyahoga County. We had a 3-county commissioner system, and while that system led to gross corruption, it was flawed in its basic nature in that major decisions could be made if 2 people in the county agreed to do that, and there was no checks or balances to the decisions that they were making. We also felt that the county government had the ability to be an economic engine for the region, and you read the 5 or 6 points very clearly. So from that standpoint, that's why we did it. And has the government that we've installed back then and elected by the people back then worked? It's provided the basic premises of what we've talked about, and that is in the system of checks and balances. You can debate at length the success of the people that have run it and the programs they've developed. But the basic premise that we were looking for of creating a system that was accountable to people, had elected representatives that represented various people, that was diverse. I think that has been accomplished, and most of the tweaks that have come since then were anticipated and have only strengthened it.
And Marty, just to follow up on that, there's this common perception that the new county government structure was a direct result of the corruption scandal. Is that true, or were these 2 events happening in parallel?
It was a coincidence, really, because there was a core group of mayors that I was with at the time that really had been trying to move the county government into this type of area for several years prior to the corruption. There's no question that the timing of doing it during this corruption really helped catapult it to victory in November.
I want to bring you in, Ms. Goldberg. The League of Women Voters was a resource for voters to learn more about the county charter and its potential to impact county government. Can you share with the audience what this was like for the League and what you all saw in the potential of the new county government structure?
Well, the League had been working to restructure county government here since the 1930s. And the Citizens League, the former Citizens League, you may be aware of that, started actually promoting reform in 1917, wanting to have a county executive and a county representative county council. I think the League was so excited, not that there was corruption, but that this is going to happen finally. We pushed and pushed and pushed and had a lot of volunteers out in the streets collecting signatures on the petitions that were, and I know many, many other people worked on this, but the League was determined that this is going to work this time. And we were just so excited to finally see it happening. We weren't involved in drafting the charter at all. Gene Kramer, who's here today, did that. The mayors who were involved in making policy that went toward creating this charter were Bruce Akers is here, Judy Rawson from Shaker Heights, and I know Steve Kaufman, who's not a mayor, he also worked on this, and of course Marty. So the League was there right behind them working every moment on the ground to get this done.
Councilman Miller, when you started as a council member, you've been on county council from the beginning. Can you share what it was like building the airplane as you were flying?
So, when I was in Columbus in the legislature, I had the Legislative Service Commission to help me, and we drafted very well-crafted bills, and when I introduced them, they typically got one hearing, and that was the end of it, because I was in the minority. But at County Council, I came in, I had the most legislative experience of any of the council members, but almost no legal assistance to work with, and I drafted some very complex pieces of legislation, including the rules of procedure that the council operates under, and the Board of Control legislation, which reviews the contracts of $500,000 or less, and I prepared these and submitted them, and they passed fairly quickly. So it was a very fluid environment in which we were trying to build structures and also dealing with some serious problems. I know when we first came in, there weren't enough people on the Board of Revision, and we had to take over the process, and council members had to interview candidates for the Board of Revisions and make appointments. So it was fluid, it was exciting, and we were dealing with problems and creating structures at the same time.
How did you manage expectations with the public, because they expected to see this rapid change in this new government?
My outlook was steady progress over time. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and I wanted to be able to say 5 or 10 years hence that looking back, we've come a long way, and so I encourage people to be patient and give it time.
Mayor Zanotti, I'm going to come back to you because 12 years ago, when you were here at the City Club, one of the questions that came forward was about 11 county council districts and whether or not we should have at-large districts versus designated districts. And one of the things that you said in response to that question was, quote, "People don't know anything about county government." So do you feel that this is true? Are people unfamiliar with county government? Why or why not?
First of all, I just, Marcia said that my good friend Bruce Akers is in the audience, and I wanted to say hi to Bruce. And Bruce was, my right-hand man through all this process. So people had no clue what county government did unless it actually impacts your life personally, and that's usually through the Health and Human Services. And we felt that we needed to try to bring it closer. And if they had local representation, at least the local mayors and the council members would be able to know the representative and avail themselves to whatever services were available. And obviously that has happened by the recent dispense of ARP funds and how they've been distributed within the local communities. I don't think 11 and 12 years later, the average voter still knows what county government does to any great deal, but you might find that true about their city governments and everything else. I'm not sure, unless it impacts you greatly personally, how much people today know about what their local governments do. But this system certainly brought it much closer to home, and with people like Dale, I know Dale's always been very good at outreach in the community. I think that just makes it better.
Mm-hmm. And Councilman Miller, please.
I would just add that there's trade-offs. Early in the county government, there were colleagues of mine that wanted to have us prepare and print newsletters and mail them out to everybody in the county at public expense on a regular basis, and perhaps the benefits in terms of understanding county government would have been worth it, but we decided we didn't want to spend that kind of money, and we did have council members prepare and print newsletters, but they were distributed at libraries and public meetings, and we didn't mail them out to everybody, and so we were trying to do some outreach, but also being cost conscious.
Very interesting. And then, so I want to bring it to present day. Now that we've kind of seen 12 years later, one of the things that Mayor Zanotti talked about was checks and balances. And one of the things I heard during the Issue 6 campaign was all about checks and balances. But it seems like County Council has gotten involved in public policy decisions. You authored the plastic bag ban, for example, and then also the racism of the public health crisis. I know then Councilwoman Brown was a champion of that. And then sometimes council can be deferential to the executive branch, and where there may not be major changes to legislation from the introduced version. Can you talk about, in this new county structure, if checks and balances has been achieved as you envisioned it 12 years ago?
So actually, I think checks and balances is one of the strong points of the new government, and it operates in three main ways. The first one is the budget process. We do a 2-year budget, and then in the off years we do an annual update, and we review all the departments. We make decisions about funding. The second aspect is that almost every 2 weeks at the council meeting we get a proposal of budget amendments because things keep changing, and these have to be approved by the council. So, and sometimes we pull out some of them for further discussion. And the third part of the checks and balances is that the council committees do oversight. In the case of the ERP project, which was running much behind schedule, the council took the extraordinary step of hiring its own consultant to give us an independent review and consultation on the oversight process.
Better tell them what the ERP.
Oh yes, the ERP is the Enterprise Resource Planning System, which is a huge information technology system designed to merge 5 or 6 old antiquated systems into a single system, which we ultimately accomplished, but it took a lot of time and effort, and so we did extensive oversight on that process. And another aspect, for example, the council initiated legislation. One of the pieces that I sponsored was a comprehensive set of financial policies for the county. One of those policies was that the county had to put out a list every year of all of the county's outstanding loans. Well, the administration was unable to comply with that requirement because the economic development loan accounting was so messed up, and we weren't collecting on most of them. And so that prompted an internal audit, and the internal audit came up with a set of recommendations, and then the council's economic development committee did ongoing oversight of the process of correcting the problem, which we did. So it was the combination of these different checks and balances, the internal audit, the external audit, the inspector general, the council's oversight, these things working together provide a lot of checks and balance.
I appreciate that, and for sharing that insight. You know, one of the interesting parts of the hallmark, I guess, of this new county government was the consolidation of many elected positions into a single county executive, and we do have an elected county prosecutor. Ms. Goldberg, I want to ask you about that because in 2009, the Legal and Voters supported maintaining an appointed sheriff, but strengthening the protections of the office, calling it a very good compromise. So organizationally, how do you approach the issue of determining whether maintaining appointed positions is the best approach with oversight from council versus elected position?
You know, going back early on, the league supported early, from the 1930s on, various constructions of county government. Sometimes the sheriff was elected in some of those. But we felt, along with a lot of people working on county reform, that appointed, none of these offices should be elected. If you go to vote for a sheriff, do you know what you're voting for? You don't, or an auditor, or an engineer. They should be professionals, and the county executive should appoint them. Now, it was 2019 that county charter reform amendment was passed that strengthened the role of the sheriff. So he remains a little independent of the executive who appoints him. We fought tooth and nail to make sure that did not become another elected position. We went to county council and testified. I did want to mention also, you're talking about internal audit. We made sure there was an internal audit. Well, you did in the original county charter. There's an internal auditor who's independent, and then the league was always concerned about ethics reform, so that in the original charter it insisted that county council would be passing an ethics ordinance, which it did. But we realized it had to be strengthened, and we worked very hard to make sure that an Inspector General amendment was added to the charter, which it was in 2018. So no, we don't. The county prosecutor remains elected, and it wasn't totally, in fact, not mostly for political reasons. Even before 2009, the league had pushed for always having a separate county prosecutor.
See, it's fascinating to me just to understand kind of the dynamic between appointing positions with oversight from council versus elected officials accountable to the voters, but also introduces a different paradigm when you have electoral politics in the office. So that I appreciate you bringing that clarification.
Will,
yes, Mayor.
If I could, you told me to add in when I wanted.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And those who know me know I'm never shy of doing that.
Yeah.
The appointed positions was getting this issue 6 was some shark-infested waters that we had to row our way through, and one of the biggest attacks they had was eliminating the appointed positions, and we fought for it, we kept it, including the sheriff. One of the main reasons was what Marcia just said. This is a strong executive form of government. So this ultimate success and failure, council will always be able to provide checks and balances and come up with their own legislations. But ultimately the success or failure of any government, and certainly this county government, will be based on having a strong executive. And we felt at the time that this job would attract many candidates because of its the significance of it. And if you elect a strong executive, one of the things that executive ought to be able to do is to build a staff around them. And the average voter has no idea what a treasurer does, or an auditor does, or a sheriff does. And consequently, it made no sense to keep those as elected positions. Frankly, all it did for many years in Cuyahoga County was politicize them. It was not a matter of qualifications, it was a matter of party politics who got those. And I think that you can make a case for whether we've had strong executives or not. That's a discussion for another day. But ultimately, the success and failure of this government will always be predicated on people electing strong executives who can provide some vision and some guidance and work with the council to make things happen.
So I would add that the issue of the sheriff remains controversial, and that there's some who favor returning to the elected sheriff, particularly citing the problems at the jail. But I support the system that we have in the charter because of the unified leadership from the executive. And I would also point out that when COVID-19 hit, we implemented a very effective program to drastically reduce the jail populations so that people with COVID-19 could be segregated. And as a result of that, there was not a single fatality among inmates at the jail from COVID-19. There were a couple of corrections officers who passed on due to things somewhat related to COVID-19. But given what went on elsewhere in the country, this was an extraordinary accomplishment. Probably one one of the most important things that the new government accomplished that's given very little recognition.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor. Sorry, Councilman Miller. One of the things that we talked about was the lessons learned in these past 12 years of government, and kind of looking forward, and particularly the next county executive and a county council person. So in these last few minutes, I'd like to hear from each of our panelists, what are some qualities or attributes that are essential traits for success in the position of county executive or county council? We'll start with
Start with him.
start with Councilman Miller and work our way across.
So I'll start and say that the county government has accomplished a reduction in partisanship compared to what you see at the state and federal level, and I think that's very important. It's important that we all work together, that we welcome everybody, that we consider everybody's concerns important, and on the executive level, you need both vision and innovation, but also an attention to administrative detail. And we tend to reward the former, but you don't get too much credit for the latter. But if you don't have it, it can trip you up. And so I think it's very important that the executive not only bring in new ideas and exciting new programs, but also pay very close attention to the administrative detail and just to deal with the organizational issues.
Marcia.
I'm here as a representative of the league, and the league wants a strong county executive. My personal feeling is that anyone elected to this post should be very aware of his or her own abilities to manage a bureaucracy. And if that person needs some professional help beyond what they can cope with, get the help. Get a chief of staff who understands how to run the bureaucracy. Hire an administrator to help. I think we've had really good people in these jobs, and sometimes it's an overwhelming job. Even though, how many of you know what council district you live in? I find that people don't really, even though we were excited to change the county structure, people kind of said, oh, what a relief, we did it, and yet they don't pay attention. In fact, look who's running for county council. We have one race out of the 5 districts, just one. One of our issues is, did this become a full-time job being on county council? It was supposed to be part-time. And when I speak to county council members or city council members, they always think that the mayor or the executive has too much power. And when I speak to the executives, they always think the council has too much power. So it's a real balance, and I would hope whoever is elected as county executive really is humble in what they are facing and becomes very open to working with council, but also finding professionals to help them.
Mayor Zanotti.
If I were to paint my picture of the new county executive, and I think this is a critical election for our county government. First, I think the person needs to be have the basic capability of building an organizational structure to run the county government. I don't think the county executive should be immersed in the administrative details. I agree with Councilman Miller. Those need to be taken care of, but I fear you get too bogged down in the minutia of the government. You need to have a staff. You have enough staffing to be able to do that, but you have to build the right staff. You have to put the right people in charge. This new county executive needs vision, and I would challenge the new county executive to go back to the issue 6 reform, go back to the charter reform, go back to the key points that we suggested this government could do, because where this government has fallen flat in our original charter, I think, is in 2 major areas, and one is in economic development, and I also think in regionalization. We believe the county government had the means to to become the economic engine to drive it because they go across all the municipalities. I think there's much work to be done there and it can be successful. And my sense is the council would be more than willing to go in there toe to toe and help those kinds of things. But I think the new executive needs a vision and needs to take the county government to the next level to achieve some of the goals that we thought it could do 12 years ago.
Thank you very much, Mayor Zanai. And that's actually something that's really interesting. Not a lot of people know that economic development is actually in the county charter. It's Article 7.
It's in the preamble.
In the preamble, yeah, prominently. So that's very interesting, and I appreciate you raising that awareness. I also want to give you, Marcia, the opportunity to plug your Here's Cuyahoga County.
We publish a book like this once a decade, if we're lucky. And this one just came out in 2018. So it doesn't even have information about the charter amendments relating to the Inspector General or the Sheriff. But it gives you a really good breadth of information about how the county is organized and all of the boards and commissions and special districts. I mean, it is, mind-boggling how much the county does do that we are not aware of. So anyway, we have plenty of these outside.
Okay.
Pick one up.
Awesome. All right, so at this time, we're going to move to the audience Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, and those joining via live stream at cityclub.org. If you'd like to tweet a question for our panelists, please tweet at the City Club. You can also text it to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794, and City Club staff will try and work it into the program. May we have the first question, please?
Yes, do you think the new county government has been more attentive to the needs of immigrants, refugees, people of color in general?
Anyone want to take a stab at that?
So I'll start, and I'll say yes. Certainly, the legislation declaring racism as a crisis was significant, but we passed an equity plan like in 2013 that created structures to work on these issues. When we came in, the county did not have disparity studies. That's what you have to have under the Supreme Court rulings in order to do any race-based attempts at remediation. So you have to do them every 5 years, and we've been doing them and using them to craft these remedies. And regarding working with refugees and immigrants, we just passed legislation for about $800,000 in ARPA money that's going to be used to assist 2 organizations that are working with the refugee community, and we also make an annual contribution to Global Cleveland for their work. So we're very much attuned to that.
And ARPA is the American Rescue Plan.
Right.
All
exactly.
right. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Awesome. Next question.
Yes. So the question really gets to Dale's point about the nonpartisan nature of county government. Unlike the federal and state, which are bitterly divided by partisan interests, as we know, on social issues. And back in 2009 and today, is there any discussion or thought about having the candidates for county council and county executive run on a nonpartisan basis as they do at the city level in most cities in Cuyahoga County?
Well, I can take that one.
Yeah, Marcia.
The league has, I don't say it's one of our positions, but we have actually pushed for nonpartisan elections at the local level and at the county level. But the pushback from both parties has been very strong, and they've been unwilling to consider that seriously, don't you think, Dale?
It has come up from time to time.
It has come up by the league, yes.
It's been discussed some as part of the charter review process, and I share Marcia's concern that she said there's only one contested race for county council this year, and I think if we had nonpartisan elections, there would be more contested races, and so So I would agree we should seriously consider it.
Marty, do you have to add to that?
It was a major point of debate in creating the charter, and I think there was a lot of consensus to making the council positions nonpartisan, but in the end, you have to mix a lot of ingredients into the final potion, and that was one that we just couldn't get through.
But when
I still think it serves its purpose of intent, and I'm a big fan, especially in Cuyahoga County, of nonpartisan. But
I think what Dale was speaking about really is how council works. The Republicans and the
Yes.
Democrats on council do work together.
Yes, that's primarily what I was referring to, but I think this is a very significant issue that requires further discussion.
And the 11 districts were created specifically to make sure that there would be Republican representatives on the council, because there were, that was an important part. The mixture of the 11 districts was very important.
So Marty, could I just ask a quick question? At-large members, was there consideration of a couple of at-large members of county council back then or not?
It was certainly a discussion point, but in reality, people didn't know. We felt that contradicted bringing it closer to home.
Yeah.
The at-large would just be another layer of somebody running countywide and trying to make the number, it's 1.2 million, 11 reps is 100,000 people per representative, and that would have even been a larger number if you'd have thrown a couple at-large in there.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name is Millie Nixon, and I'm from Hawkins School. So my question is that as a school, the challenge that we're focusing on right now is housing stability. So my question is, why do you think that housing stability is a bigger problem for some areas more than others?
Great question. Councilman Miller, can you start us off?
Yes, I would start by saying that the 1940s redlining map still holds sway. If you look at the map in 1940 at what areas of the county banks were making loans and what areas were redlined, the areas that were redlined then are still economically disadvantaged today, and what's required is us to take extra effort to focus on those areas that have been disadvantaged in the past and help achieve a greater parity.
Marshall?
Well, I can at least quote from the League's positions on housing in the county or greater Cleveland. So enforcement of codes, lead poisoning is a big issue, of course. Mandatory inspections, access for limited income owners, and housing that meets the varying needs of residents, including assistance programs, and adequately funded and efficient housing court. So those are what we push for on the county level. It's a really difficult issue.
Marty, anything? Okay.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, I know that's something that's going to be a major issue. It already is, and going to continue to be a priority in the next few years.
The council set up a housing trust fund, and we put money into housing every year as part of the regular budget. And it's not as much as it needs to be, but we have a structure in place that's a good start.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi there. My name is Lisa Rapaski, and I'm currently a student at Cleveland State, and now it's called the College of Education and Urban Affairs, and we were so lucky to get a table because of Dean Anglin. And I also had the privilege of growing up where Bruce Anglin, I went to Orange City Schools, so I grew up with your son David. I was gone for 21 years and have recently come back from California, which is its own beast. And so I'm a student of urban policy, and my question is really kind of twofold. One is, it seems like what the council, in terms of the plastic bag ban, racism as a public health, those have kind of lacked teeth for lack of how, I don't know how else to describe it, coming from a place where plastic bags and styrofoam were banned many, many years ago. This has been quite a adjustment. And then secondly, I think it's called the Sunshine Law, I'm not totally sure, where we do highlight conflicts of interest, and I don't feel like that's discussed enough. And I know it came up last year in the congressional race, whether Chantel Brown gave favor to her boyfriend's company. So those are kind of my two questions. I think it's Sunshine Law, I'm not totally sure, and just think, council decisions having teeth and being implemented.
Well, the Sunshine Law relates to open meetings and open records. What was the first part of the question? Was about
Lack of teeth.
The lack
the
of
lack of
legislation.
teeth. Well, the plastic bag ban was set to go, and then COVID hit, and the Ohio legislature threatened to not allow it.
Well, actually, the Ohio legislature did pass legislation that partially preempts local communities from doing this kind of regulation. And we think that if we do it in the right way, and if we don't impose fines on people, and we're limited by what the state has constrained, and we're actively trying to market and encourage compliance, but we're somewhat limited by the state environment that we're operating under.
See, when COVID hit, people didn't even want to touch your bags when you went into the store. So that got delayed by COVID as well.
Hey, Will, that actually, while plastic bags is very important, there's even a more important layer on top of that, and I'm sure Dale would agree with this, and every local mayor. For the last 10 years or so, the Ohio State Legislature has really compromised on the home rule of local municipalities. And that is I'm assuming it's still a major problem for local municipalities, where the Ohio Legislature decides to stick their nose into and devalues the importance of home rule.
Thank you. Next question.
This question came in via text. One goal of any governmental reform would be a governing structure better able to solve big problems. It's not clear that our government is entirely up to the task of solving some very big problems today. Consider the future of the Justice Center and jail, or what's been happening with Child Protective Services, for instance. What should voters and good government advocates make of this situation?
Well, take a stab at that.
So, I will add the opiate crisis to that list, although it's a national crisis. But I'm horrified that 700 people die a year in Cuyahoga County. It should be like you can count them on one hand. And the county government has shown the ability to take bold action at times, like when we emptied out the jail to deal with COVID-19, and also when we moved to temporary administrative headquarters on a wing and a prayer so that the hotel could be built by 2016 and give us a chance to land the Republican convention, which we did. But some of these problems have proven very difficult, and it simply requires strong elected leadership at the executive level and good cooperation between the executive and the council, and the willingness to consider a wide range of alternatives, and the willingness to try some things that you haven't tried before. On the opiate crisis, the executive just sent over legislation, which I support, to create a $10 million innovation fund out of the opiate money and try to come up with some solutions that we haven't seen before. And just because what we've been doing isn't working, I support that. You got to be innovative in government and willing to take a chance, even though not everything you try to do is going to work.
And I don't think the structure of county government, going back to the 3-commissioner form, would make any difference whatsoever in those.
Would have been worse. It would have been worse.
Yeah.
Think about the major issues we're dealing with right now ultimately, to the question, the answer to the question is, you need to elect stronger leaders. This government was based on a strong county executive, and as a council person, Dale can do so much, but without a strong executive, it makes his job just that much more difficult. Think of the jail. Think of the money recently pledged to the Global Innovation Center. Those controversial topics in the old form of government would have been decided by 3 people. 2 would have had to agree on something. I mean, 2 agreed on the MedMart. That's how we got it to begin with. Now, that doesn't rest in just 2 people's hands. You've got the council there to make sure that what's proposed makes some sense for the government.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, thanks for being here. My name's Jack. I'm also with the Cleveland State Crew. And I'm definitely in that boat of not fully understanding the role of county government. But I don't just want to ask, what do you guys do? So I'm gonna frame it this way.
You got the book?
I picked up the book. I'll read about it. Yeah, exactly. And also, there's a lot of young people in the room where this isn't really about reform for us anymore. This is just the county council that we know.
Right.
Yes.
So we're trying to understand it. So I'll ask it this way. What is unique to county council? Like, what comes across your table that isn't coming across the state level or the city level? Because I think as we learn civics, we kind of understand the city, we understand the state, but what is uniquely coming to you guys? And then in the future, what are some issues that you think that the county council is really set up to be attacking, like that they're the ones unique in that position to, handle a certain problem? Is there any sort of low-hanging fruit that you think the county should be addressing like that?
So I think the Health and Human Services is primarily at the county level, as is most of the criminal justice, and we have some unique opportunities to deal with climate change. A lot of that leadership is being done at the county level, and we have an opportunity to make a difference.
Excellent. Thank you. It's interesting. A lot of people think of the county government as the social services safety net, which it is. But going back to the earlier point about economic development also being in the county charter, I'm curious, how do you find that balance between prioritization of health and human services, but also adhering to the economic development mandate in the charter?
So I think they're not really separate. A lot of the social service problems we have are because people are not stable economically and not able to provide for their families, and that there's disparities in economic equality. And if we could do better on the economic development, then the human services would be better. And so I consider them as different aspects of the overall question of enhancing the well-being of the community.
Part of economic development is workforce development. That's been a big push on county council. They say yes to education. They're funding more education for high school graduates here, also working on pre-K. And the workforce development goes hand in hand with health and human services and with economic development and job creation. Mm-hmm. It all ties together. Of course, when I go to council meetings, I see a lot of discussion of roads and bridges. I mean, there's a lot of just basic things you don't think about when you're, voting for your local mayor or voting for president of the United States. Mm-hmm. That's how it gets done on the county level.
So on the workforce development, I would say that the county's development of the sector partnership program has revolutionized the workforce development. We're focusing on the primary areas. It's information technology, it's healthcare, and it's manufacturing, and we're talking about hospitality being the fourth one, and we're getting the businesses and the people who are available to serve as better aligned, and it's we're doing better on that. 10 years ago, it was just totally fragmented and disjointed. It's now only somewhat fragmented and disjointed. So we're making progress.
Awesome. Next.
Well, on economic development, the component the county can offer is they can pool things, they can bring the county resources to one location. Too much economic development is focused on cities trying to create more jobs for themselves, bring businesses into their city, and many times that creates a non-healthy competitive environment that one wins and the other one loses. The best example I can give you is down in Columbus, Intel just recently decided that they were going to build, and everyone knows, the chip plants and the construction jobs and over 3,000 jobs, and that's maybe it's a harder task for Cuyahoga County, but the county government does have the ability to oversee and try to bring all the resources into one spot. And I think when we talked about economic development, our goal was a gain for the county is a gain for everyone that lives in the county. And I don't think they've done that role well since we formed it. And I still think it's a challenge that they need to address for the new executive.
So Mayor Zanotti said that we haven't reached our potential on regionalization, and I agree with that. But we haven't done nothing. The executive created an Office of Regional Collaboration, and the council includes it in one of the committee's jurisdictions. And early in the new government, the Office of Regional Collaboration worked with the Mayors and Managers Association and tried to get every municipality to agree to what they call an anti-poaching agreement. And this resulted in some long and intractable discussions about what was poaching and what wasn't. And I don't know that it fully accomplished its purpose, but it did create a little bit more awareness of the problem that we should try to work together and not against each other.
One of the wish lists on the league positions is that we would have some kind of regional tax-based revenue sharing league. So, and I'm not talking just about collecting income tax in one spot. I'm talking about sharing property tax funding, so that a city that has a lot of property tax income would share it with others who do not. So that's something that the league has pushed for a long time, but it's another tough one. Very difficult to get somebody to share its money, one community to another.
All right, we have time for one last question. I want to honor it because she's
sorry.
been standing there patiently. That's okay. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Anaya Harvey, and I'm a junior at the Master's School of Hawken. Previously, you guys touched on how redlining has a lasting effect on communities. I wanted to know, how do you think redlining and segregation of neighborhoods has affected how people apply for housing vouchers and the success rate of housing vouchers?
Not mine.
So that's a difficult question.
Yeah.
I think that's the hardest one we've had today. But I think there has been substantial migration in the county. The population keeps changing, and to my mind, the biggest problem is that housing vouchers aren't accepted everywhere, and so we should talk about passing source of income legislation so that if you're paying for your housing with a voucher, that shouldn't be a reason that you could be denied housing, and I think making that change would be beneficial.
Thank you. And also, it's interesting how housing plays a huge part of the social determinants of health, which also impacts economic development and workforce. So I thank you very much for that outstanding question. All right, well, thank you to Marcia, to Dale, to Marty for being here with us today. Today's forum is the John W. Barkley Memorial Forum. Mr. Barkley was a City Club member for 70 years, joining in 1916, just 3 years after the City Club's founding. He began his career as a social worker and had several jobs in the Cleveland school system before joining the law firm of Squire, Sanders, and Dempsey. Mr. Barkley also served as the mayor of Shaker Heights in the 1950s. We're grateful for the support of the Barkley family who have made this annual forum possible. We'd like to welcome guests at the tables hosted by Cleveland State University College of Education and Urban Affairs, the Mastery School of Hawken, and MC Square STEM High School. Thank you all for being here today. Just announced on Tuesday, October 4th, you're welcome to join the City Club for breakfast with Chuck Todd, moderator of Meet the Press on NBC News. He'll discuss the political landscape of the state and nation. And on Friday, October 28th, we'll be joined by Dave Isay, founder of StoryCorps, for the City Club's 2022 annual meeting. Tickets are still available for each of these forums. You can find out more at cityclub.org. And that brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you to each of our panelists, Mary Zanotti, Marcia Goldberg, Dale Miller, and thank you members and friends of the City Club. I'm Will Tarter, and this forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.